second. All in favor? Aye. All right. Meeting minutes approved. All right, on the consent agenda, we have 949 Wooten Drive, which looks like it was a deck project. Do you guys have an update on that? Hit your mic.
James and I visited the site and reviewed the plans, and none of the infrastructure is near any trees that would be affected. So it looked, and it's also really well planted property. You can tell the people take care of their trees.
Got it. So no trees coming down. It was just a matter of tree protection with the construction.
Yeah, and there was some infrastructure that looked like it could be close to 1 or 2 trees, but in review, when I went to the site, it was easily 25 feet away.
Sure. Okay. Sounds good.
Was there, excuse me, Matt, was there supposed to be one more on there?
Yeah, they pushed that to the next,
Okay.
to next month's, maybe just because of things were printed out or something. So yeah, there was another consent agenda item that we reviewed, but it's on next month.
Sounds good. Good catch, James. All right. No new grading permits. No new tree removal without approval. No new violation notices. We will skip over old business and the ordinance update until Eileen gets here. Try not to go too fast, I guess. Number 9, new business. So watershed grant opportunity, the Wheeler Tract. Frank, you want to take it away?
God, that came up at once.
I know.
Sooner than I
Ill
thought it
prepared, I apologize.
No. Is he in here? Because I actually can't do anything without a PowerPoint. I'm genetically incapable.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a bold statement, Frank.
Do I have to do it from up there?
In order to click through the presentation, it's probably easiest to do it up there.
So I
Ian.
have you queued up down here on the
Okay.
lines.
Yeah. Present to us, Frank.
I'm doing well. How about yourself? Usually not on camera, so. So it's just down and progressive, and I'll get you
Okay.
on the screen.
Okay. Is this work? Yeah. Yeah, he's going to get it up on the screen.
Give us your name and address.
Yeah, Frank Paris, 215 Pembroke Avenue. I would have voted for Lisa, but she wasn't part of my ward.
I also would have voted for this.
So this is an opportunity. My education has been basically in how do you apply for a grant in Radnor Township. So I've been doing some research, and this is nothing new. Back in 2013, Radnor Township purchased about 71 acres of land from the Ardrosen estate, one of which was the Wheeler Tract. In 2017, the National Land Trust came up with a preliminary plan as to what to do with this new township property. And there's been a more detailed plan, which I can't find, but I understand from Steve Norsini there is a more detailed plan. So really all I wanted to do today was to kind of get the STC's okay or permission to actually pursue this grant. And the reason is there's a lot of pews we got to genuflect in front of in order to get this kind of approved. We got to do a detailed plan. We got to get approval from the STC. We're going to make any changes that are required from you guys and then present it to the VOC to get an okay. So that's all I'm really looking for tonight, is that okay. The Wheeler Tract, as I said, was acquired in 2013. Currently, it's under a license agreement with Fern Valley Farm to be used as a pasture. And I understand Commissioner Booker has raised this as a possible reassessment of the lease as to whether we want to continue it or not. It's 27.65 acres, so it's a lot of land, and as I said, it's all pasture. It runs along Darby Creek. It's an endangered creek. It's on Darby Paley Road, Sawmill Park, Skunk Hollow, so if you can put in your mind, we have a little corridor of township property along Darby Creek. So, as I said, this isn't a new thing. At the time of acquisition, We intended to use it as a trail, reforest it, and also create a buffer along the stream. And there is an Androsen plan. There's a lot of stuff, garbage along the creek right now on the field side, and there's some places where the grass goes right up to the creek. And with all these, beautiful cows on the creek, there's a lot of stuff going on that's adding stuff to the creek, and probably explains why I've never been able to catch a trout there. So the plan was neighbor meetings, advisory committee meetings, a lot of stuff happened. The NLT services, we paid actually for this plan to what do we do with this property. So all of this was envisioned, and what I'm understanding is because of budgetary concerns, money concerns, nothing has really happened. So it's kind of in stasis, as we speak. This is a picture of it. Darby Paley Road's in the upper right. You can see the creek going through the floodplain there. There's another floodplain from some sort of run. I can't remember the name of it. So we have two floodplains that need some riparian type repair. The light blue on the upper left is really sites for potential bridges across the creek to give people access to the pasture. And as you can see, there's brown and yellow trails all over the place. So I've walked the creek. It's beautiful, and this will only make it better. So that's kind of an existing situation. What we have now is an opportunity. The Pennsylvania Horticultural Society and a Pennsylvania Tree Vitalized program, they're offering us some money. It's funded by DEP as well as Aqua and PICO. And if we don't do anything this year, that's really okay because they offer these grants every year. Funding may go up and down because of the situation for money in Pennsylvania, but it's not a one-time deal. The grant will cover 75% of our costs, so that's pretty cool. And it'll cover staff time, debris removal, all of those things that are listed up there that they would pay us if we come up with a good plan. The other 25% is really pretty neat also because they allow us to make up that 25% with volunteer labor. So, I could donate an hour and they would say, oh, that was $30. So that would go towards our 25% offset. Plus, there's a lot of apparently very wealthy neighbors, if you function the size of their homes in that area, that we could probably do some sort of, fundraising, grant raising type situation with them. So opportunity, basically a grant that would cover 75% of our costs. We don't have to do it all at once. James and I were out there looking at it and we were thinking, at the very least, we could have a 5-year plan. Phase 1 could be just get rid of the garbage. Some of the fallen trees are holding the bank together, so we may not touch them. But we can clear out debris, invasives, plant a few trees where the pasture abuts the creek. Then the next year we could do like I calculated, James, 1,800 feet, but it could anywhere between 1,000 and 1,800 feet of creek. And we could do either a 50-foot setback or the NLT plan called for a 100-foot setback. And I think there's one person in the room that would support a 100-foot setback. Right, Sarah? Okay, good. And then we could just move out. If we didn't have the cows there, we could move all the way out to Darby Paley Road. With the cows there, we can fence it off and just, cows destroy trees. So just keeping the cows away from the trees with fencing and stuff is very, very feasible. The only thing they require of us, we have to have, if we put signage up there, they would pay for it. They just want credit. That's life. What we need to do is create a budget for the costs that we want covered. And it's not only the cost of some of the things that were up there, like trees and bushes and cleaning out debris, but also maintenance, because it's 25 acres and, generally that would fall to Public Works, and we just have to, be cognizant of the fact that it's going to be more work for our township just to maintain the thing. The grant actually asks us to have a plan to maintain it for 25 years, okay? So I can promise anything because I won't be around that long, but, you know, you guys might want to consider it. So these are the budget. Well, you can't read it, but anyway, on the left, there's tons and tons of little detail sorts of things we have to come up with. James actually came up with some rough plans as well as estimates for that, so it's not like we're starting from zero. I've checked with Karen Wilwall. She's a watershed specialist from the county. She was pretty enthusiastic about this being a really good idea, which raised my hopes that we would be granted, you know, the money for the grant. I've also talked to Melissa Kahn. She is with the Township, and she basically walked me through what's the grant approval process for Radnor. And I've talked with Ricky, and, you know, Ricky had, you know, the maintenance concerns, as he should, of course, so that not only do we plant things, but they live for the 25 years. And James mentioned this, and a couple of other people mentioned it. We need somebody of, you know, John Hausbach's to knowledge, or someone of his caliber, although I have to mention that spell check actually put caliper in there, and I don't think John would have appreciated that, so I changed it. So that's basically some considerations. The benefits, I mean, these are almost no-brainers. I mean, this is a big bragging point for the township. You know, if we can get this money and revitalize this field, and maybe even eventually reforest it, it's a big bragging point for the township because it exhibits our environmental concerns. It's great stewardship for the land and also great for the community because they can actually use it. So, long story short, just looking from the STC, and I'm willing to, you know, chair this sort of effort, but looking to the SDC to say, do we want to actually pursue this, you know, and come up with a more detailed plan, meet all the requirements of the grant, and just go forward with this thing.
So Frank, thank you. This is great. I think that area could use some love and attention, and it's been a while since it's been touched. I guess my biggest question would be that existing lease to Green Valley Farms, we would probably need to determine the specificity of that so that a project like this could actually happen, right? Because the duration of the lease is going to dictate how much we can do, where we can do it.
Yes. No, you're absolutely right. That is a restriction right now.
Right.
Even if we went gradually, the lease may preclude us from doing that,
Right.
modifying the lease.
Right.
So, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Matt.
No, so the property where the farm is, so there's barns on it, there's storage facilities?
Just the big shed on the downside.
So you're not looking at where the houses are?
No houses. Sarah's right. There's a manure barn.
So it's just a field across the road
Yeah,
from the farm itself?
yeah. I think the one,
Used very often by the county.
Yeah, occasionally, right?
I think the only land that had a house on it was actually sold to the Boy Scouts. So I think they're out of the picture and stuff. And I think my 1,800 feet was all the way into a wooded area. And I think James's 1,100 feet stopped at the woods. So we've got some forest there already. But
So would the cows coexist with this grant plan?
it could. But the way they would coexist, in my mind, is with fencing. You'd have to fence them off from the new growth bushes and trees and stuff like that.
I mean, and the only reason I ask is because it's, you know, it is a legacy, the cattle are a legacy of older times.
Yeah.
When, you know, Ardrossan was a different place.
That's
And-
true.
And
It depends on how you define legacy. If you go back, there was just Indians there and woods, but anyway, that's
No, I'm
argumentative.
just saying that, like, you know, there could be some sensitivity from some people about if the cows went away.
That's true. We do have cows on the other side of the road in our rye field, which we own, and I think it's just the rye field that has the cows in it right now.
Yeah.
Lisa, what do you got?
Okay, so I just want to weigh in on the cows briefly. So yes, we do have the lease with the Fern Valley Farms, and they, the farmer does compensate the township for the use of those fields. The other thing that with those fields is the cows are basically the management of those fields for the township. So I think that, I love this plan, and Frank, you and I have talked about it. I think it's a great idea, and I think that the cows, we can find a way to make the two things work together. There is already an electrified fence there that keeps the cows from actually going into the creek. I mean, maybe that's just moving that back. But I think that any plan that we are making needs to, consider that the cows are there and that they will be there, be staying there. I mean, I don't know the exact terms of the lease. I don't know, Ricky, if you know better than I, how long that lease runs, but yeah, I mean, that's a thing, and that was, Frank, you had some really great research with regards to how that they're that's part of the intricacy of the deal, and it also helps the township by managing those lands. If we didn't have that, it would be certainly, I think, a significant, it would be significant for the township to have to manage those lands. And we do have plans for trails through there. We do need to find the funding. You're right, Frank. We do need that, but that's my goal for the next 4 years. So we're going to be working on that.
So I mean, clearly, you're absolutely correct. We'd need to talk to the farmer and whoever's managing the lease for the township. I think we can do it in steps, and right now, the creek bank we can do without affecting the cows, on the other side, just to do something to stop the erosion. I don't know about you guys, but the storms that we've had this year means there's a lot of water flow going down that creek, and what it does, it just erodes the banks. So we're dealing with, I guess, with climate change, a deteriorating situation. So do all that research with the lease and with the farmer. But even if we could do some year one cleaning up and stabilization of the banks, I think that would be a good thing to do. I'm not
Frank.
arguing, I'm actually supporting.
Oh, yeah, no, yeah. I was just going to say, so the one thing that will make this project, you think, even more attractive, so the residents who live, downstream of that area, we do experience significant flooding that happens down there. At Darby Paoli Road and Goshen, we've had water rescues. The police have had to effect water rescues there. So if this is this also kind of a flooding? Would this also serve as you guys are far more the experts than I, would this serve as like a kind of a help with the flooding so that everything's not channeling down as well? Would that be a benefit also?
Absolutely.
Frank, could you flip back to that original plan that
This one?
was the table, yeah, this one right here. So this was going on between 2016, 2019. At that point, the lease was in effect, right? There were cows there at that time, right? So it seems as if we got this far, that I'm sure there was some sense of, let's work togetherness with this, which is good. But I think step one would definitely be understand the terms of the lease inside and out, just to make sure we can pursue this without spinning our wheels too much, right? And then the other thing I'd like to mention is just with the recent news around this particular track specifically, all of the feedback, to what Lisa was saying was, I think Radnor Township collectively, appreciates the land for what it is with the cows on it, but that doesn't mean that, a lot of the invasive species and cleanup that needs to happen, still needs to happen along with, revitalizing it. So I think everyone wants that, but as a part of what, this project entailed, which was, neighborhood meetings, I think that will definitely be a crucial part of this too. And then lastly, I know there was budget discussion around hiring someone specifically, Radnor Township, for grant writing specifically. Do we know if Ricky or Lisa, if nothing? Killed? Okay. So we will.
So we have a budget meeting on Monday night,
Mhm.
and I think we should all wait until we have that meeting on Monday to fully understand the breadth of everything that's in the budget. That
Sure.
It is, the board is supposed to vote on the budget on Monday night, so I think we gave some direction to our township manager at our last meeting around things with the budget, so, yeah,
Got it.
we have
Sounds
another
good.
meeting on Monday, so.
We'll wait till then. And then I guess if you could flip back, Frank, to the list of items that this grant would cover. Are trails, they're not
No.
included in this?
No, this is actually slicing, from the Ardrosen plan,
Mm-hmm.
this is just the watershed.
Right,
And, this fantasy I have of eventually reforesting the whole field,
sure.
but it's primarily on the watershed, which is that 50 to 100-foot buffer before you get to the stream.
Sure. And Lisa, you said there were plans drawn up for a trail, and that went
Yeah.
through the
Oh, yeah.
cow pasture?
So there is
There are the
plans.
plan, I'm sorry.
Gotcha.
No.
No, the trails are both along Darby Paley Road in brown. There's another one in yellow or some ugly green, right next to the floodplain and looping around. There's extensions of the trail from Sawmill Park along the creek. There's traffic improvements to that little like gravel parking lot in the top part of the screen. And these trails, if I'm remembering correctly, were grass trails.
The yellow is grass, the reddish brown is hard surface.
Okay, thank you.
The yellow is.
trails be outside of the fence line? Is that the idea of this?
I don't think they envisioned cows when they were doing this plan.
So the cows, I think, were supposed to be in the center, I think, the idea. So this is part of it, then it goes across the street, it goes across Sawmill, and there's actually a part where they had to do the sewer work. It'll go through there, cross over Wigwam Run, which is the creek that runs right by the farm, and then come up across through Skunk Hollow, and then connect, and then there's a mown grass trail that's supposed to go through the rye field, which is the other field where the cows graze. And the cows, I think, are supposed to be, contained inside of that.
So
And
this
the
never
trail goes
envisioned
around.
the eviction of the cows.
Sorry?
Cows were never meant to be evicted.
The cows were what?
Not meant.
I'm sorry.
No, that's my fault. The cows weren't envisioned to be removed.
I think the cows, as Matt said, are definitely a legacy. So I think as much as we can, as much as the idea that these trails and the cows would coexist, I think that was definitely the intent. And I wasn't part of those discussions. This happened, predates me. But yeah, I mean, they signed the lease, so the lease agreement with Richard was part of this whole thing. So I can't imagine they would build trails without considering the cows being there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So-
Something to be investigated then.
Right.
Yeah,
What
thank
I was getting at was, this might become a larger project, right? So while all of this work is happening, if the trail plan could be reinvigorated by this process, not to say that you would lead this, but just knowing that it may come up, right? Where, if we're looking to disturb the area in a good way, then, why not do it all at once as an option, right? So just making sure we're thinking through all of the possibilities with this. I think it's great. And I know that although, the Willows, Skunk Hollow are large tracts of land, Radnor Township continues with its increase in population year over year over year, and we could use additional space, I think. So I think this is all good. So me personally, I would say, yeah, let's see how far we can get with this. knowing that we got to check off some legal boxes first just to make sure we can proceed, but I would say, let's do it.
Okay. So is that a go-ahead? Anyone else need to weigh in?
No, I just love the idea of pursuing grants. We haven't done enough of it, so it's hard to argue with this. It's hard to poke holes in it.
Yeah, I'm good for it. I think the trees and the cows, though, can live together if we fence it off, and I think there's plenty of room for everything.
Okay.
So, and I think we should work hard on getting volunteers and stuff so we can keep the cost down.
Yeah, as you mentioned the other day, we've got the Boy Scouts there.
Yeah.
Great volunteer project, get badges, things like that. And we've also had an offer for some Cabrini biology students would also be willing to volunteer.
Perfect.
So, yeah, this could be a nice community event.
And we could try to get I could try to get some contractors together, maybe, and we could
Yeah,
get a work day going or something like that.
and that'd be good, good. And we'll be mindful of scope creep, Seth.
Don't worry, I could add more to it if you want to.
Yeah.
How about a launch site?
Yeah, I was envisioning the sign would say, "Eat more chicken."
Nice. I like it. All right. I don't think we need to vote on this per se, but I would say it sounds like the recommendation in general is to see what you can do, Frank. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Moving into hazardous trees. I did sift briefly through the reports. I will note that my personal property is on there, 8 Radnor Way. We weren't near any of the triggers, but I wanted to make sure I submitted the hazardous tree reports, and that includes a couple of the neighbors. We had a lot of big dead ash trees. You'll see there's a maple and a walnut there, but those were both, the maple was about ready to fall over, and the walnut was about ready to do the same, and also leaning over some utility lines, so those came down. And does anyone have any further comments on any of the hazardous trees or the reports themselves? Nothing? All right. Trees removed by Radnor Township. So it looks like we have quite a few there, a few heritage trees. Ricky, do you have any information on those trees that were taken down?
Yes, they were all opined by John Hosbeck and needed to be removed.
Sounds good. Thank you. Pardon me. So we're still waiting on Eileen. Before we move into public participation, I guess we can touch on old business and the ordinance update. I know there were some communications flying around. In all fairness, I'm definitely not up to speed on the latest, but if anyone has any commentary around the ordinance update. By all means.
I'm Sarah Pilling from 29 Garrett Avenue, and I was going to do this during public participation, but I talked to Matt about it. He thinks it ought to be brought up now. If Ricky could turn on the overhead, I took some photographs. The situation out of last month's conversation, we had a conversation about people having permits or not, and what do you do about it? So a case came up adjacent to my house on a Friday, which was not a good day for it to come up, but that was the day the trees were being cut. Steve Norsini was out. The woman who did the permits was out, and I ended up with Ricky. And there's no judgment on Ricky. But anyhow, these are some trees that were taken down by MG Trees, who I know is permitted, and there's no comments on the quality of the things that were taken down. So I watched this happen and was concerned. So I sent Steve Norsini an email to say, Simple question, do they have a permit? Steve wasn't in. The gal who did the permit, I don't remember her name, is not in. They sent a inspector down who spoke to the tree people and said there were only 2 trees that were taken down. Witness here are 6, 7 trees. And I was told that I would have to file a right-to-know request in order to find out who did it. I know who did it, where it was done. I knew where it was done. I know who was paying for it, and whether they had a permit or not. Well, that's fine, guys, but they got up to 2 weeks to answer a right-to-know. And by that time, the trees are gone, they're down, place could be re-landscaped. So I just would like clarity because I've seen a lot of it in Garrett Hill. I live in Garrett Hill, where Saturday afternoon, big trees come down. And as a climate science person, we need to do everything we can to save the tree canopy that we can, other than the ash trees that are dying. And yes, I've had a great big ash that I had to take down. Very complicated because it had a 12-foot fence. It was on the inside and they had to attach it from the outside. That doesn't matter. But anyhow, this was the question as to how does a concerned citizen, because we talked about it at the last meeting, well, call us up and ask if they have a permit. But the permitting process, as I learned it, can be as long as 2 weeks. So I bring this, Matt suggested I bring it up during your ordinance because maybe there's another way to do this. So I just bring it to you.
I thought Sarah, I thought Sarah's point was, it made sense while we're looking at the ordinance, to consider, is there some modification or change, or is there some clarification that we could make around the permitting process so that people understand how it works? Maybe we can't change the 2 weeks, but at least we can make it clear to people that this is the reality of what's going on, so that, because I think people see work being done and they wonder,
Sure.
like how is this happening, and why is it happening, and what's the time frame, and
Sure. So Ricky, in this case, 6 trees, it looks like a couple of these were possibly in decline or dead.
No, they were.
No?
They were all good trees.
All good trees?
They may have had ivy on them. They were oaks and maples. They were not trash. Now, part of this issue is if you know Garrett Avenue, because now I'm going to tell you where it is. The private road that Radnor House, called Chetwynd, had to cut to Garrett Avenue was the old Falcone property, and they put in a straight road. But it did not go along the property line. And if you look here, here's the edge of the road. If you look at this stake over here, that's the property line. Now, these houses all date from way before the ordinance came in, and all our deeds run from a central line on Lancaster Avenue. How many times has it been widened? Is there a pin? I know from personal experience, the property lines can shift 18 inches in either direction. So it's a little iffy about this. So this became a boundary dispute because originally along Chetwynd Drive was a beautiful 6 to 8 foot wrought iron fence, which is beginning to look a little wobbly because it was probably put in 1910 when the Mary Converse house was built. And Radnor House reluctantly discovered that the fence was on their property because they had asked all of us to take out $1 million liability policy because I have a fence, but my fence is only 4 feet high on my side. And Radnor and the Converse property, which was Powers, Craft, Parker, and Beard, said, well, that's not our problem, that's your fence. And so Radnor House, being worried about liability, has taken it all out, which is really very sad, but it's beside the point. So this row of trees were along the new road that got put in 1951, but some of these trees were mature canopy trees, and I've lived there for 40 years, and I've watched them, and they were oaks and maples.
Sure. So Ricky, what was the township's position on this?
Well, when it comes to the permit, when it comes to,
just knowing that it was 6 healthy trees and they did not get prior approval.
first thing I would ask is if we can revisit this under old business at our next meeting when John
Sure.
Hosback is here.
Yep.
Because when it initially happened, I was on vacation, and Ms. McVeigh had sent out the highway supervisor, who came out and looked at the job, and there were, I think, 3 trees that were removed. 1 was on the ground. And then they proceeded to cut down more, and I remember when Ms. Pillings had called, and we thank you for calling. And then what happened was, we called and we found out that John had to go out. The trees were already going at that point, and he had to go do a survey to see what was left, the condition they were in. And I don't have that email, that's why I'd like him to be here. I was searching for it. But he commented on the condition of the trees that they took down and why they needed to be removed. In regards to the process of the permit, and again, I would like to say thank you, Sarah, for reporting it, because our job, once we get a phone call, we go out and investigate. That's our job. If they don't have the permits, then we have to shut them down and stop the work. So once we find out the company does have a permit, or they're not violating anything in the shade tree ordinance when it comes to the trees, we don't have any leg to stand on if that tree company is registered and they're not doing anything in violation. And then when it comes to a report that's given by Ms. Pillings, our job is to go and investigate. Part of it is not giving information back to the residents who make the phone calls. Our first priority is to investigate and see what's happening, and then go from there.
Right, and in this case, let's say all 6 were hazardous. You don't need a permit
No.
to remove those,
You
right?
don't.
I mean, you
So
submit
yes.
a hazardous tree report, but that doesn't invoke a permit.
No.
That just
No.
says, here's what I'm doing.
But we will make sure they're registered. So
Right.
that's the first step, to make sure the company is registered. And then we need to find out what's going on with the trees that are being removed, how many they're removing. And that's what John was able to do. We may have not been fast with everything that was done, and that does happen. And that's the reason why that tree canopy study and the person, I think me and Frank had talked about it, and you guys may have heard about it. That's why that position is so important, because it's not always easy for the township and the staff, for me, myself personally, or for other guys who have other responsibilities, to run out and chase some of these tree guys who are around, fly by night, come in, do a job, and disappear. So we try, and we always don't move as fast as we could. I will definitely acknowledge that. But we do take it serious, and we will give information. But in regards to what Ms. Pillings is referring to, as far as having information back, that is the process that they have for the township, where you give a phone call, we just
So
don't
you
give
don't know whether
information
they
out.
have a permit or not.
Right. Okay, well, thank you for
So
that,
it was
Ricky.
just an example of it.
Sure. No, I do think.
And I didn't want to make trouble for Radnor House, because they have 4 lindens that hang over my roof. So I don't want to get on their bad side. I just used it as a case to find out. I mean, I have personally seen 3 properties in Garrett Hill in the last year. They've pretty well cleaned out all the trees. I don't know how. They just had somebody come and cut them, and neighbors are saying, why did they do this? Well, people don't seem to want trees anymore, but in the terms of climate change, they don't understand we really need them. So
Sure.
thank you for listening. I just want to understand better your policy.
Sure. No, thank you for bringing that up.
Sarah, the picture you had, the photo, the center top one, what type of tree was that?
They were all oaks and maples.
It looked like it had a branch coming out, like 2 feet at the base.
There's a pine tree,
Okay.
that Pinus strobus, that they did heavy pruning on. See,
The one that was covered in vines,
Yeah,
it doesn't look like it was,
it was a maple, and I don't know,
well, they left a stump of it.
they've left 3 stumps that are easily this tall. Why? But I heard Matt say that it's a cheaper price if they don't have to take the tree to the ground, and I don't understand that. That's another whole issue. But see, because the property lines are so strange in Garrett Hill, because it's old, and there was no zoning. The building, the Mary Converse House, which was Powers, Craft, Parker, and Beard, they thought all those trees were theirs, even particularly the ones at the back, and were very shocked to find out that they weren't their trees. And they've been taking care of them, and then this boundary dispute started, and I understand lawyers have become involved. So nothing happened. And and with climate change, all this undergrowth that's just growing like topsy. But it's now all whacked to the ground. They even, I'm sorry to say, 2 large azaleas had been transplanted to just behind the mailbox on Garrett Avenue. Those were not on Radnor House's property. They're now cut off at the ground. So it was a bit of a blitzkrieg, which got me thinking, what is going on? What can you do to get clarity? Right now, I would say there's no way to get clarity. So
thank you for bringing this up. Next meeting, we can get some more details from John and go from there. And I do think some of the revisions and ideas we have to the ordinance should help, not necessarily solve for this specifically, but help. So thank you.
The other point is that Frank spoke about, the Darby Creek Valley Association has just gotten a $100,000 grant to work on storm mitigation from top to bottom along the Darby Creek. So they would be a good partner with Radnor for this Wheeler tract. And the other issue that I don't know how you deal with is the floodplain that comes down the middle. The cows love to be in there, and that's fine, but you're bringing God knows what down into that stream, which is endangered. I don't know whether you are aware that the part of the life cycle of the American eel uses the Little Darby Creek, and they have been seen in the Willows Pond as part of their growth cycle. They spawn in the Sargasso Sea, they come to the rivers, up the creeks, they become a freshwater larvae fish. They transform into about a 4-inch eel, American eel. They then, at that magic moment, go down the creeks into the ocean, down Delaware Bay, and back to the Sargasso Sea. And they are endangered because there's a hot traffic. All you need is a net with a fine mesh net and a spotlight at night. And American eels sell for $25,000 a pound. So it would be really important ecologically to protect that stream, and it's not protected now at all.
Got it. Thank you so much. A wealth of information. Much appreciated. Eileen, welcome. So we've sped through the agenda tonight, and we've looped back around to old business, but we've got through everything else. So now's your time.
Okay, so if we like, we could do the ordinance.
Yeah, let's do it.
And it would mean, basically, we made it 50% of the way through last time, so I marked off where we left off, and then we could see how far we get. Does that make sense?
I am willing to go until 8 o'clock.
Me too. Let's
Let's
roll.
do it.
Okay. So,
Yeah, actually, I thought the best part's already happened.
Frank
You missed my
had
presentation.
Frank had a great presentation. You'll send around the deck, correct?
I will.
Sounds good.
was there a standing ovation?
No.
Did the crowd go
Close.
wild?
Close.
No, they were very insensitive.
There was a lot of cow talk.
Okay, sorry I missed that. Okay, so where we left off is Section 8, Review of Permit Applications. That sounds relevant. Land Development and Subdivision. The comment we had here was that it says here, in the event replanting is impractical as determined by the Shade Tree Committee, the applicant has the option of making a payment in lieu of replanting. No dollar value is specified. So what we were recommending here is to be specific. Residents, $250 per tree, developer, $500 per tree. Hazardous trees would count in the overall count for developers in township. Hazardous trees would not count in the residents' count.
Yeah, so I think we've spoken to the dollar amount a ton of times, so I think
Mhm.
that makes sense. Could you go over the count
Yep.
comment again?
So we said for the hazardous trees, the overall theme of the ordinance, just to refresh everyone's mind, was that we look to be more strict where we could have a bigger impact, which is typically developers in township, just because those projects are bigger, versus residents, where we give them more so the freedom to operate as a resident. So we said the hazardous trees, because sometimes they've been in the total count and sometimes they haven't, that we would say hazardous trees are in the total count for a developer when they have to use the tree replacement formula. They would not be in the count for a resident.
And that was our way to walk before we run, theoretically. And I think we also touched on, is the formula different for hazardous trees? But I think we netted out where that would just add
For
two-
heritage trees?
two counts. Well, not, to heritage trees as well, but also if you have a count of 10 healthy and 10 hazardous, your 10 healthy replacement formula would be higher than the 10 hazardous
Yes.
formula, right? But I know we were talking through that, and that would
Be a little
ever
confusing.
complicate things.
Yeah.
But I do think that would be a good solve for some of the redevelopment projects that we've seen recently where, there's hundreds of trees being taken down where, let's say, there's 50 declared hazardous or in decline. That grouping of 50 now requires new trees, but I don't think it's necessarily fair to make them abide by the healthy tree formula, so maybe there is a merit for a hazardous tree formula.
Yeah.
I'll accept anyone else's commentary.
Yes, I was just doing my CEU courses, and I did some studying on hazardous trees. And I think for developers, I like your idea. A hazardous tree typically needs to have a target. So if a developer is coming into a property that's open or nothing there, then that tree has a really low hazard rating because there's no target. Probably no pedestrian traffic, no houses on the site already. So I think I think after reviewing all this, I think we should be more strict on the development, because these trees aren't really hazardous to anybody
Sure.
until you put a house next to it.
That's a very good
So-
point.
I think we should keep it in the count.
Okay.
And if you wait long enough, all trees die, right? So
Correct.
I think there's merit
Yeah.
in order to maintain canopy, to
Yeah.
take those into account.
Right, and a hazardous tree, like me and Frank were going by Darby Creek there's a lot of wildlife living in those trees as well.
Right.
So they do serve a purpose. So I think they should be replanted if they are going to be taken down for development. I think it'd be good for everybody.
But James, would you think that there should be a special hazardous tree formula, or should we just group everything together?
So, no, I think we should determine if there's a 100-year-old house on a property, somebody's coming in to redevelop and put a new house in because it's less expensive to just rebuild. If they do have a hazardous tree on site next to that house, then I think we should keep that the way we've been doing it.
Okay, so one formula for
Yeah.
everything.
But where they're developing near Eastern, say, or one of those big developments where there's nothing there now.
Mhm.
I don't think that we should count those as hazardous. They should be, these trees are coming down, that's part of the formula.
Right.
Or an open lot, residential. There was we had 2 meetings ago, or last meeting, where Coopertown Road was being developed. That's been empty for years. And I think there was 5 or 6 hazardous trees that we didn't include on the compensatory chart. Those trees, they're not harming, if they fall, they fall. They're not harming anybody, they're not harming the house. I think something like that should be, we should be asking for trees for those,
Right.
if the ordinance keeps going.
Yeah, I agree, James, and I think also, like, some of these developments that we deal with are, there'll be 120 trees, and they're all gone. They're all ruled, like, these trees are, it's not even hazardous. The terminology sometimes, these trees are ratty, these trees are strange,
Or in decline.
deformed, they're like, that's not, I think we're losing a lot of canopy because people don't want to deal with it. No one wants to deal with trees that are, they're 3 feet from each other. But that doesn't mean they're dying. So it's like, it's almost like a deep woods, it's like the trees in our parks where people don't walk.
We have
I-
to work off the target. Is there a target or not?
I like
If there's no target,
Mhm.
then where's the hazard coming from?
I signed you up to refine the definition of hazardous trees, because that's one of the things we had from last time, and I think that's a really interesting way to look at it.
Right off ISA.
Perfect, perfect. Okay. So it sounds like we're saying that we agree with the $250 and the $500. $250 for residents, $500 for developers. All in favor? Aye? Okay, good. And then the second part being, it sounds like we are agreeing to hazardous trees should be included in the tree replacement formula for developers and township, but not for residents,
If there's no target.
with the definition applied. Okay. All in favor? Aye. Okay, wonderful. Let me go down. Okay. Just 1 second. Okay, next one is, now we're on to clearing and grading permits. Okay. So we considered here, please add language that granting waivers, especially impervious, must not negatively affect downstream neighbors. I think this is a comment that came from the Conservancy, Radnor Conservancy. An example was given that this happened on West Wayne Avenue. And the massive driveway, I guess, drains off into Little Darby Creek.
Sounds like this would be outside of the SCC's purview though, right?
Yeah,
Because it's grading specifically.
right, this would be more so maybe planning.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Did we get, Eileen, the recommendation from Gretchen regarding the terminology, 5 versus 6? Do you recall that into the sheet?
I have all of her
That was a new
comments.
one
Oh,
as of like a week ago or so.
was it to change it to 5 versus 6?
So there's some language that
Or
says
just
no
clean
more
up?
than 6.
Yeah,
And then there's some language that says 5 or less, which both mean the same thing.
oh,
It's
okay.
just,
Harmonizing it?
there are different use cases for either term depending on how you're talking about it.
Okay. We could clean that up.
Yeah,
When we
I
find it,
think-
that's okay.
I think there's ways to adjust language so that we could make it absolutely consistent throughout the ordinance. Because I do think it does vary here and there.
Okay. I can make a note of that.
Mhm. And it might even be worth, because if it happened once, it'll happen again. So maybe we include a sentence somewhere that says exactly that same thing, which is, if we say 5 or less or 6 or more, it's in reference to the same thing. Some sort of clarification language.
Yep, okay. And then the next one is around the trigger, what actually requires it to come here. So right now, it's 200 cubic yards or greater than equal to 5-car parking lot or a pool. Those are the 3 triggers. The question is, do we want to keep this criteria? When Seth, Ginny, and I met, we suggested yes, basically for tree protection fencing, providing Matt and James are okay reviewing this offline, because that's really, those will not end up coming to the committee because they're rarely contentious because no trees are coming out, given these triggers. But I guess Matt and James, the workload would fall to you. Are you okay looking at those?
I think so. I mean, it feels like that's in our purview now.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
I know we talked about ditching that requirement or increasing it, but I do think when we chatted about it in detail, where, that's 250 cubic yards is about, basically putting in a pool, right? And with those larger projects, it's enough disturbance to, raise some eyebrows and for us to take a look at it, I think, to make sure especially no existing trees are impacted.
Okay, the next is what triggers you to come here along the tree line. So whether it's 6 or more trees of 6-inch diameter, breast height or greater, or a heritage tree. There's no mention, it kind of goes to what we were talking before about hazardous trees. If you're taking, Seth, you explained the way it happens via they just submit a form. Do we want to change that trigger? Do we want somebody taking out hazardous trees to come here, or is it okay? And
I know
actually,
that. Go ahead.
I should back up, because now that I'm reading, our writing here, our suggestion, it was more so just make it clear whether hazardous trees are included or excluded in the tree removal count. And I think we just made that decision. Include it for developers, townships,
Developers.
exclude it for residents.
Yeah, I think, so the hazardous tree reporting system, I think, works. And there is some sense of, John verifies, looks at the report, goes on site where necessary, along with whoever else needs to. So I think that works. And that creates a, documentation trail, so we can go back and, per earlier comments, if we ever need to understand if the same property has been removing trees year after year and just staying under the count, we could potentially have the ability to go back and look for that stuff. So I think the biggest probably open item is, how do we document the undocumented, right? So, all of those cases of fly-by-night, per Ricky's comment, tree services, and for those that say they're cutting down 2, but it's actually 7 or 8. And I think the solve there is the zoning officer, which we'll find out Monday, whether or not that happens, so that we have more bandwidth for someone to, I think we joked about it last year of having buying a shade tree commission car and having a zoning police go around and look for trees. But I do think, in all seriousness, that just having the bandwidth to, when people call in, we can go at the same day where they're, maybe they cut down 2 trees, but not all of them yet, so we can catch them earlier versus once they're all gone. So I think that's really the crutch of that, to begin with, that line item.
That's very reflective of Sarah's points.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
it's like she brought the real deal, the real example of something that probably happens
Sure.
every now and then. So, yeah,
And like, in my case, we had just some trees taken down, Eileen. We didn't hit any of the triggers to need to submit a hazardous tree report, but I did anyways, just for the sake of documentation.
Yeah.
But I don't think requiring, let's say you want to remove one hazardous tree, I don't think we should require to go through the whole rigmarole of submitting a hazardous tree report, unless it's a heritage tree, of course, right? Same goes for, 5 healthy trees. I think did we touch on adjusting that number or not yet?
No,
Okay.
heritage trees are coming up next.
I have a question about,
Actually, we did. Oh, go ahead, Claire.
about documentation. Is there a way to, instead of requiring it, or the things that we do require, but we welcome it in our overall plan for the tree canopy? So is there a way to put something in the ordinance that says, help our township with information and documentation, even though it's not required? I don't know if that's even possible, like what Seth was saying, because that's helpful to the overall tree plan and canopy for our township.
Yeah, so maybe it's adjusting the language to say something to that effect. I agree.
Or is it too much language? I mean, I don't want to overburden us, but
Yeah, I mean, it could be as simple as a hazardous tree report is required for such and such, but also, we'll accept any other.
yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Any other what? What would you say at the end
Meaning
of that?
any other scenario that wouldn't trigger the need for a hazardous tree report.
Yeah.
We'll accept any other reports. A hazardous tree report is required for,
I do think when I was filling out and reviewing the hazardous tree report in combination with our tree people, I did feel like we could revise it. It kind of flows
easier?
awkwardly,
Yeah.
but make it a little bit more universal too, so it's not necessarily, I mean, we can still call it, maybe we adjust the name of it. It's a tree report to include hazardous and healthy, because I found,
That's a good way to do it.
like, we had one healthy that was just it was a Norway maple invasive, and it was a 6-inch, and it was just overcrowding, and we had that removed too. But as I was filling it out, I excluded it, but at the time, I was like, well, if the form was laid out in a way where it said, hey, just list all the trees,
Yeah.
mark which ones are hazardous, which ones are healthy, that felt like it would be a good revision, so.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, and a rather easy change if we just change the form.
Yep. So, yeah, maybe the line item for that recommendation is revisit the hazardous tree report form.
Okay.
That's not going to address the immediacy of someone cutting down a tree without a permit. I mean, if township people go up there in their township T-shirts and township trucks, they could probably stop something, but no one else can unless we get issued uniforms and guns.
Right.
Which
Well,
is
I
not-
think that's where we
I
just
mean-
need more manpower, right?
But they need some sort of statutory authority to walk up to a contractor and say, hey, you got to stop. Or
They-
show me your permit.
I think that's the case now, so, I mean, there has to be reasonable cause, right? But a zoning officer could go visit any property right now of work that's going on, just to verify, right? I mean, I don't think that is necessarily the issue.
So the head count's a township head count, not giving us
Right.
the authority to challenge someone.
Right, I don't, knowing that we're not township employees, I don't think that could ever be a
Okay.
case where we could be
Okay, I was
able to
misunderstanding.
enforce, right?
Okay.
One other thing I think you need to keep in mind is if we change that up, and I could be wrong, but when the hazardous tree report is done, John has to go out and look at it, right? and we have to pay John to do that, correct?
Yes, you're correct.
So if we're adding on other trees that he's gonna have to look at that are still fine, we're still paying money to John to look at trees that are, fall within the ordinance that people can take down. I'd rather put that money towards like planting.
That's a
or
good
something.
point. It is a balance, right?
Yeah, maybe you could set up like an email account if somebody wants to keep track. You can email to an account to the shade tree, and if somebody wants to volunteer and track it, do it that way. Tally it up every month or something like that. But I think putting more work on Ricky or John, just gonna cost more money
So maybe
unnecessarily.
the revision to the hazardous tree report is clean it up so it's a little more smooth to fill it out, but also give, like, just a listing of what are all the trees coming out, which one are the hazards that are triggering this report, which one are the healthies. Because we're 9 times out of 10, we would ask, okay, yes, you're removing these hazardous, but what's the scope of the project? What other trees are you removing, right? So we ask that anyways. So it'd be nice to have it all on the same form.
Okay, so I captured that in James' idea about, hey, could we streamline the hazardous tree report and provide enough information such that John doesn't have to go out and look at it, such that we can redeploy those funds elsewhere?
Yeah, I think it'd
Cleaning
be
out.
worth at least discussing with John. Is there, I'm sure there are some cases where he doesn't go on site, right? So if there's any modification to the process, that would help him more.
Well, any hazardous tree report that's filled out, he has to go look at, right? Or, yeah.
Okay.
So you're only filling those out unless there's a heritage tree, or if you're removing more than 5. That's when you fill out that form.
Sure, right.
So if we're asking people to fill out a hazardous tree report on a tree that's 20 inches.
No, yeah, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying for the cases that do trigger, because it's more than 5 or a heritage,
Yeah, then they would,
if there's a way where John wouldn't need to go out, I don't know that there would be a way, right?
yeah, I still think he should go out
Yeah.
if anything triggers over 5 or
Sure.
if there's a heritage tree.
Sure.
I think you need to keep him
Yep.
to look at it. I'm just thinking anything that falls in the ordinance now that doesn't trigger action, that we shouldn't make more work.
Right.
If there's no.
I agree, yep.
If we're not looking for compensatory trees or something like that.
Okay, so I'm going to move us along to heritage trees, because I think that will be a hot topic. So we said earlier, when we talked about the tree replacement formula, which we did leave in place, we said for heritage trees, add to the formula that no more than 10% of heritage trees can be removed from any given township project. Not more than 20% can be removed from medium trees. And hazardous trees are included in the count.
So I like that idea. I think it might, just hearing that, might get a little dicey with if we're including hazardous trees in the count, but they have to come down. And then that drops below 10%. That could be a mathematical problem. But all things aside, I do think to limit the amount of heritage trees being removed, having some language like that makes sense. And I do think, I know this is coming up, but lowering from 30 to, say, 25,
Oh, yeah,
I think is a good idea.
yep.
I think maybe John proposed this initially, or someone, but
I think it came from the community,
The
the
community.
25.
somewhere, and I do know, I think there's some language somewhere that, if you look up what's the definition of a heritage tree, there are some jurisdictions that use the 25 number versus what we're using, the 30. And knowing that there's been a lot of trees taken down, I think our our stock of 30-inch heritage trees and above is dwindling, right? So lowering that number will help us out to keep those big guys around.
Okay. So is everybody in favor of 25 inches versus currently it's 30? Okay.
James, I see us. You're not? What's your rationale?
I will go, I think 30 is good. I don't know, I actually tried Googling and trying to figure out wording. I didn't see any that are that size, so, in any wording.
They're all larger? James, is that what you're saying?
I didn't see any around 30. I did see some around 40 inches or 35 inches.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want to.
I just found an article. James, I must be a better Googler than you. Here's guidelines for developing and evaluating tree ordinances, and they talk about heritage trees being 25 inches. But again, you know, this is just,
Maybe
it
that's-
seems like there's no definitive definition. And I think it varies too, right? So if you go in a redwood cedar forest where they're all 100-inch trees, then the definition of a heritage tree might look slightly different than it does here, right? So I do think it's somewhat environmental and situational, what your definition is. And I think that's why we're probably seeing varying numbers.
Okay, so it sounds like we're okay with the 25 inches. Because it did come from John or the community. We have an article on it. And James, it sounds like you're okay living with it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I see some other language around the age of the tree. I don't know if,
Oh, go ahead. What
like,
is that?
75 years or older, but
Then we would have
how
to
do you,
know.
that's really
Yeah.
tough to figure out.
Yeah.
So we'll just put that one to bed too.
But what's funny about that is that you could have a, 60-year-old holly
Right.
that's 20 feet tall. But that's a significant tree. That's more significant than a 25 dBH red maple.
Right. That's a good point.
I mean, that's
So
a
that would
problem.
capture that.
Well, that's a problem. I mean, if 25 is where you're going to settle on heritage, we got a lot of heritage trees, but they're really not. I'm sort of with James on this. I think 25's not there.
What, too
I-
small?
Too small?
Yeah, I mean, I can give you the survey numbers on the street trees, but there are thousands of, there are probably 1,500, 1,800 25-inch DBH trees on our streets.
But how many heritage?
Oh, if we make it 25, they'll all be heritage. They're not now,
Right.
so.
But what I'm saying is we have fewer heritage now, at least in my eyes, with all of the redevelopment that's been happening. I feel like we're dwindling in the 30-plus category. So to help slow that down, because I can only imagine how many cases where someone just says it's a 29-inch, right? To skirt the rule. So in any event.
I also think if you do move it to 25, you should take into account some trees like Norway maple, which
Right.
are an invasive tree, and somebody's cutting down a 25-inch Norway maple, and we're saying that's a good tree. I just don't think it looks right sometimes. There's some trees out there that, tree of heaven, it's like, you find a 25-inch tree of heaven.
I mean, for those types of trees, I would think we could put it in like we do with ash trees, where you're allowed to remove it because of the situation with the emerald ash borer, and it doesn't have to count. So, I mean, we could do something like that if there are other trees in that category.
I think we should, but that might be a different
Yeah.
thing than 25.
But, I mean, just to play devil's advocate, an invasive Norway maple is still providing canopy, but it could be stunting growth of native, but it still is canopy at the end of the day. And I would love to see it replaced if it were taken down, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree as well. Okay, so the next one is, for heritage trees, there's an application. Filing fee. So we talked about, in place of the application fee, require a $500 donation per heritage tree to the Shade Tree Committee.
Right, that's another,
Yeah. It's a way, the theme is how do we make it more difficult to remove heritage trees or make it less, we want to disincent people to do that.
right. I think 500 seems high. Maybe we match it to the 250 number?
And it may be tough because we just lowered the heritage tree number to 25 inches versus 30 inches.
Right, so maybe
So maybe we say that's good enough and not require a fee,
Right. Or
a
we
donation?
Pick one.
Yeah, one or the other.
It's a tough one. Which one would discourage it more? Probably the lowering of the DBH.
Yeah, and we get 6 trees.
Right.
I'd
And if
rather-
somebody doesn't want to replant the 6, then they can do fee in lieu of, which would be more than 250.
That's true.
And if somebody really wants to take it down, they wouldn't bat an eye at $250. So, and lowering the number from 30 to 25 gets us 6 trees. Invoking the fee only gets us money, which we can plant more trees with, but it's not an immediate effect.
No, about half a tree. $250 would be like half a tree. Except for the way Frank is going with the grants.
That's right, he's on fire over there. Tree fire.
So this is $250 if you want to take a
It
tree
is.
down?
Yeah, it's an application fee for a heritage tree.
That would be 25 inches.
Yes.
To remove it.
Do we want to implement a fee, $250? Donation, I should say.
Donation.
Yep.
I
A
see we,
fee, a tax.
I see we run with the 25-inch
Yeah, I think so too. No, yep,
and
okay.
ditch the application fee.
Okay. Let's see. Somewhere in the ordinance. What's that?
We figured you would be, James.
What, the 250?
Yeah.
The fee? Okay. So this is where it, in the ordinance for heritage tree removal, it says must replace DBH per DBH, which is kind of odd because it's in conflict with the whole tree replacement formula. So the suggestion here is just to eliminate that criteria.
Yeah, that was odd when we found that.
Okay. So I'm going to assume folks are okay with that.
Where is that?
In 8C, heritage
It's in
tree
8C?
removal?
That's right, okay. I was confusing that with John's recommendation to do a cost per inch replacement.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say we definitely should revise that language.
Okay, good, we'll do that. And then the next one is 8D, commercial zone tree removal and planting. So initially, I'd written maybe we want to delete this whole section and just, the commercial requirements would just be the same as all the other requirements above. But right now it does read, application required when one or more trees of 2.5-inch DBH is removed. So it's a very stringent criteria for commercial zoning.
It is. I remember on Lancaster, where the Wawa is, up towards, like going towards the Devon Horse Show, for instance. There were, I think, 2 trees removed, and there was an issue with sending a certified letter and not finding the right owner, but that was a scenario where they violated the one tree rule, essentially. And they just weren't aware of it. As far as it being too strict, I mean, a lot of the commercial zoned properties in Radnor Township are all in smaller tracts of land where those single trees might be very important trees. So I think that's probably the rationale for why that was there to begin with. So with that being said, I'm okay with
Leaving it in?
leaving it in. I think it's just a matter of policing it is the other problem.
Yeah, because we rarely see that come before us.
Right, exactly. And I don't, like the WPA project, for instance, that was obviously
60 trees, yeah.
a collective project. But,
Well, and those trees are in our streetscapes. So
Right.
they're township trees, so how many, when you're thinking about commercial properties, which are mostly parking lots and, you know, there are not too many opportunities for a commercial property to have
A lot of trees.
another tree besides the street trees.
right,
Yeah, so I think to Seth's point and what you're saying, Claire, we leave it in as is.
yeah, because if there
It's
is
such a
a
visible
tree
area.
on their property, it's probably an important tree, because they probably have few trees.
Now I'm thinking of like Penn Medicine now, they just planted all those trees. So in, 25, 50 years, will that would apply?
Well, if it's, I guess, if it's hazardous,
I mean, eventually, right? So
Right.
there are commercial properties, now that I'm thinking about it.
Oh, okay.
yeah, I mean,
Oh, large
there's
ones,
definitely a
yeah.
mix of like big properties with tons of trees, and then there's a mix of really small properties with like 1 or 2 trees. So how do you accommodate all?
Yeah.
But I think that's like, if, let's say, on North Wayne, if the Great American Pub said, I want to remove the tree that's on the corner, with the current language, they can't do that until they come before us. Not that they
Right.
would ever do that, but
Right.
that would stop them from doing it,
Right.
which I think we would want to
Yeah, exactly.
vote on.
Because otherwise you could clear all of North Wayne Avenue.
Right.
Every property there could remove the one tree in front of their,
Right.
guess
Except
that's
that those are
WPA.
street trees, so that's not the pub's,
right, it's
that's not their
They
tree.
don't own it.
They
Okay.
may have put that one in, but
Yeah.
when you think about, we put
Oh,
everyone else.
We definitely put it in, because
the
we
other
put in
ones.
all of them.
Well, I'm talking the bigger one that's like kind of nestled back a little bit.
Yeah, I think that was
Oh, was it a
original, like
township
part
tree?
of the original
Oh, okay.
township.
Back in the day.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah. Because it is pretty close,
All right.
except there's, well, I get maybe, I don't know.
Okay, so next, so it sounds like we're going to leave the requirement as is. Next up is street trees, number 9. And we're making our way to the end. Okay, so, planting. This is from the Conservancy. Can you add or encourage township and residents to plant riparian buffers along streams, creeks?
Was that?
I'm trying to think how we would put that in the ordinance.
Right.
I think that's more so like township projects to look at.
Well, just like, so, bear with me while I talk aloud. So we have a list of recommended trees to plant. Why couldn't we add a section of recommended ways and installations of trees? as guidance? I know we have like
Yeah.
communications and things that exist all over the place, but if there's a way to bake that into the ordinance as a,
If it were guidance, we could post it as a guidance document versus putting it in the ordinance. That would be probably easier.
it would be. I'm just thinking of if it's in the ordinance, it'll live forever,
Yeah.
just like we have the list of trees. Or
Okay,
maybe it lives in
okay.
the list of definitions
Mhm.
at the very least.
Yeah.
Like what is a riparian buffer? Throw it in the,
Yeah, we
you know,
could
because
do
there's
that.
a list of, like, there's 3 or 4 pages of definitions.
Add to definitions. We could add to definitions and we could add guidance of when to use.
Yeah, or like, we could talk about monocultures, we could talk about riparian buffers, we could talk about.
We have monocultures in there.
Okay,
because-
we
because
do?
say-
Okay.
Yep, because we did not permit monocultures.
Okay.
So we have that already in there.
I didn't realize that was.
Yep, we
Oh,
added it.
As a recommendation, I got you, okay.
Mhm. Okay, so we'll add to the definitions and we'll add guidance as to when we employ riparians. The next one is,
Excuse me,
yeah,
I was also, this might fall under street trees, but any planting like the township does, I think we should encourage, or maybe even mandate, that all trees be native trees unless there's like a certain landscape that they're trying to reconstruct, like I think it was Morris Road or somewhere,
yeah,
where they put in the cherry trees
yeah.
at the BOC. But I think like the plantings we do, we planted a lot of cherry trees in the last couple of years. I think we should stop planting cherry trees and plant native trees. That'll be better.
So James, you saying that when we as a committee in the township plant trees, or do you mean also the residents when they're using the tree replacement formula and developers?
So for our tree plantings and township.
Okay, gotcha, okay.
Yeah.
I could live with that. Okay.
Yeah, same.
Does that change, James?
What?
Like
the
native?
tree list?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay, so a cherry tree is,
Not native, Asia, native to
yeah,
Asia.
right, okay.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So I don't think it would, I mean, unless a new tree is introduced, a new species.
I don't know enough, does it mean that they don't?
It's a tree that's not gonna be invasive, it's a tree that's grown in the US that does well, I guess. I'm not sure I know what the native trees are.
Yeah,
Can't,
'Cause the issue with invasive is it could potentially stunt the growth of natives because they potentially grow faster than natives.
so like a cherry tree, I'm curious.
so
is-
that wouldn't be
That's-
an invasive tree,
Right,
but it's not a native to our region.
Right.
but is it a bad thing to include them? Because doesn't,
It's not as bad
Yeah.
as invasive, but.
Right. You don't want to plant invasives, and they don't sell invasive trees. You're not going to find a Norway maple at a nursery. You're going to find cherry trees, but the cherry tree it won't have as much benefits as a oak tree would, or a red maple, or a Nyssa, or a native tree to this area.
Okay. Are we okay with native trees? Okay. So next one up is, currently the ordinance says that the township has the right to remove any street tree at a resident's expense that obstructs a traffic light, interferes with overhead wires, etc. Our suggestion when Ginny, Seth, and I met was to make it at the jurisdiction's expense, meaning it would be the township, PICO, etc. So instead of the resident paying to remove a tree or trim a tree that obstructs a stop sign, the township would do it.
would it technically be a street tree if it's by a stop sign?
perhaps, one would think.
If it's
but,
in the right-of-way.
It's in the
clear.
right of way, so I like that idea because I don't think you can force a resident to pay for a tree that's by a stop sign. Even if they
Yeah.
had even if they planted it, it's still in this right of way.
And I think recently Pico took down trees. They paid for the trees to take down in the St. David's area that were underneath the wires. So I don't think this would be tough.
Yeah, and
I mean, what's coming at the Board of Commissioners level is this huge argument, debate about whose responsibility are the trees in the right-of-way in Radnor. And the township, previous township administration was really pushing to make residents responsible for the maintenance of trees in the right-of-way on their properties, which is a very unusual step in this country. Most townships take care of the trees in the right-of-way, and for a lot of reasons. One, safety. You don't want people climbing the tree they're responsible for with wires. And so anyway, this whole issue has been sort of percolating at the Board of Commissioner level, and I think it's coming. There's going to be some debate starting in I would say 5 weeks or so. I don't know. That's just what I hear. So I don't think the Shade Tree Commission should weigh in on who's responsible for right-of-way trees. It's just it's way past our.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's going to be a huge decision one way or the other.
But I think for at least this, for the ordinance right now, we can agree that a resident shouldn't have to remove a street tree that blocks a stop sign or an overhead wire, et cetera. Whoever wants that tree removed. Yeah,
That's
it's not happening. Okay. Okay, good. Then it sounds like maybe the ordinance wasn't being applied or
Right.
followed. Okay, good. So then we'll
yeah,
correct
the
that.
solicitor can tell us otherwise if
Correct.
there's some other reason why that's there. Time check, 8 o'clock.
Oh, my gosh. Okay,
How many
wait.
more items do we have?
We only have a few. I think we can make it through it. Do you want to try?
We've been going at like 5 to 10 minutes per item.
So maybe not.
I say we table it.
Okay, I'm fine
we
with
don't
that.
mind.
Nope, not at
And then I
all.
think the next time, once we get through this list, we should prioritize which updates we, like need to have. Do a nice to have, need to have list. Just so that once this gets in front of the solicitor, if there are some issues that could hold up getting it updated, that we are all on the same page with saying, okay, that's fine, let's just table that for later.
That's a good idea.
Because I guarantee you, there's going to be 1 or 2 of those that require further investigation.
Yeah, yeah.
Eileen, will you send us your updated notes?
Yeah.
I'm looking at one from a while ago, so I was
The
thinking.
last one was September.
That's the one I have,
Oh,
okay.
then you have the most, that was the one that we're reviewing
Okay,
now.
okay.
So actually, you're in good shape.
Thank you.
But yes, I'll clean this up and then I'll send this out. Yeah, because the next item actually is maintenance of street trees.
Yeah, we could talk about that for half an hour. I think.
Exactly,
Ma-
exactly. So I think it's a good call. Okay,
Madam
anything
Chair.
else tonight?
Can I, Madam Chair,
Yeah, of
could
course.
I just want to touch on one thing. I know we're going to table the Radnor house with John, but he just sent me a text because I tried to find out what exactly the trees were, and he just said they were all ash. So again, he'll be here probably next meeting, and we can reopen that discussion, but just so that it's all fresh in you guys' mind, he just answered in regards to that and said they were ash trees.
That would explain it.
Oh, okay, that's good.
That would
Okay,
explain
great.
it.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Ricky.
Ricky.
Okay, meeting adjourned. Have a
Thank
nice
you.
night.